Okay, Shavua Tov, Chodesh Tov. For some of you that have been here, who've been coming to the shir for a while, I'm apologizing a little bit. We're doing a psalm I did 2 years ago, so maybe maybe you forgot about it. Maybe you weren't here either. So, but it's worth revisiting because I'm now thinking about this poem in different ways than I did when I did it before, and of course, the poem that we're going to do is so apropos for Rosh Chodesh Elul, because today we start reciting this poem every day twice a day, depending upon your minhag. Nusach Sfard and Eidot Mizrach after Shachris and Mincha, and Nusach Ashkenaz after Shachris and Mariv. Whatever the minhag is, you're still saying it twice a day. And you're saying it twice a day all the way here in Eretz Yisrael until Hoshana Rabbah. In Chutz La'aretz, they say it until Shmini Atzeret, because Shmini Atzeret might be Hoshana Rabbah because of that, the doubt of the day. So they say it an extra day in Chutz La'aretz. But so the poem clearly has to do with this time of year. So as we go through the psalm, the poem, we want to do two things. Number one, we want to do the poem itself. You can sit in front because I know she's away. She's in the States. Yeah, she went to the States for a chassan.
Not as challenging.
Right. So we want to do two things. We want to look at the poem as the poem and forget about the fact that it has to do with you're back. It has to do with Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Sukkot. But we also want to look at it in terms of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur as well. I mean, we want to try to do both. And when we do it, I just have to remind you, this poem, perhaps more than most of Tehillim, people don't try to look at it as an organic whole. That there's this attitude, I just understand this verse or that verse, and there is sadly a tradition throughout our history that we sometimes look at Tehillim and we don't read the whole psalm. We're emphasizing just one verse of the psalm. If I can burden you with one of my complaints, in the Art Scroll Siddur, maybe I should turn off the tape for this. In the Art Scroll Siddur, there's a beautiful paragraph of collected verses called Yehi Chavod, which we say right before Ashrei, okay, every day. We said that paragraph. And in the Art Scroll, it says, say this paragraph with extra oomph. I forget what word they use. I don't think they use the word oomph. They would say this paragraph with extra something, okay? And that bothers me because that's the one paragraph that David HaMelech didn't write. Because that paragraph is a compilation of verses to get you in the mood for saying Ashrei. In other words, you're really supposed to focus on Ashrei. That's what the Gemara says, and that's what Halacha says. And if you come late to shul or something, you have to catch up. You can skip Yehi Chavod. You can't skip Ashrei. So that Rabbi Art Scroll tells us that this is the one, but that's a mentality. The mentality is I'm not concentrating on the whole of the poem. I'm concentrating on certain specific highlights. It's like it's turning Torah into highlight reels, rather than watching the whole game, if I can use a sports analogy. So in this poem, we're going to have to do both. We're going to have to look at it with the component pieces, and probably it'll be next week that we'll put the pieces back together again. Because the poem, when you see it in its entirety, is amazing. The pieces are precious. The entirety is priceless. And that's what hopefully we're going to see, as we go through this poem this week and Bezrat Hashem next week. Okay, let's begin right away. LeDavid, it's a psalm. Now, it happens to be a machloket among we say it was written by David HaMelech, and I accept that, and that's fine. But there is an opinion among some of the historical critics of the poem that say it was written not by David, but Lid David, was written by Leviim after David HaMelech for David, because it's about David. And I still subscribe to the first opinion that David HaMelech wrote it himself, and I think the emotional impact of the poem is stronger if we really believe David HaMelech wrote it. But it's a viable shot that it was written about King David rather than by him. Okay, and the Lamed can lend itself to either interpretation. Okay. That's a relatively unimportant detail. Now we get into Hashem Ori V'Yishi Mimi Ira. Hashem is my. Now I so much feel like translating this as my light and my inspiration, because I really like the Righteous Brothers when I was growing up. That you are my light and my inspiration. Okay, whatever. Without you, I can't get. Okay. So, anyways, but it's not my light, my inspiration. It's my light and my salvation. Okay, and that's the normal translation. And what happens is, before we go anyplace else, this is one of those parts of the poem that the Midrash and the later rabbis dissect into little pieces. Ori, according to the Midrash, is Rosh Hashanah. And Yishi, according to the Midrash, is Yom Kippur. And so that's not Pshat. That's a Midrash. Pshat is that David's saying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you are, the light of my life. You are what motivates me and guides me. And Yishi, ultimately, I have faith that you are going to get me through my difficulties and vicissitudes, because David HaMelech led a really tough life. He was a warrior and a king, and he had trouble with his father-in-law. Okay, in modern parlance we say you have a difficult mother-in-law, but in Tanakh he had a difficult father-in-law who wanted to kill him, right? King Shaul, and then later his own sons turned on him. So he has trouble with Ammon, Moab, Plishtim, Amalek, outer, but he also has inner. So my light and my Yishi, perhaps that refers to both his inner struggles and his outer struggles. My light, you help me get through my inner struggles. Yishi, you save me from my outer struggles. That could be a nice shot. However, we look at it that this is the reference to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We're going to talk a lot about that even more next week. There's something from Rabbi Soloveitchik that's really beautiful that we'll do next week. We have to do the whole poem. But in the spirit of it's talking about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and also this time period, Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is the only name for God which appears in this poem, is in the poem. That's why I highlighted it. It's bold throughout the poem 13 times. And that can't be a coincidence. And of course, 13 references the Yud Gimel Midot. Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei. The name of God appears in the poem. Yeah, you can count them because I put them in bold on purpose. Yeah, so it's there 13 times. So it's like David HaMelech was saying that this poem is like the 13 attributes of Hashem, the 13 Midot HaRachamim, the 13 attributes of Hashem's compassion for Klal Yisrael. So in other words, that concept of Hashem forgiving and saving and giving a second chance, all of that, all of those ideas, which are part of the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur attitude, but includes the 13 attributes, because that also includes Elul. Because in Elul, we're getting ready to, and we're saying Slichot. If we were Sfaradim, we'd start saying Slichot tonight. Or we started last night, I apologize. We started last night. We Ashkenazim don't start for another couple of weeks. Baruch Hashem. I'm like a zombie during the Slichos weeks. So it's like to do it for a month and a half would drive me crazy. When I lived in Efrat, right below us, they opened up a Sephardi shul. And at 5 o'clock every morning during slichas, because they blow shofar during the slichas. So it's like, oh my God, oh no. So it's like I might as well have been a Sephardi. But anyways, so that's L'David Hashem Ori Vishi Mimi Ira. Since Hashem, you guide me to make good decisions, that you're my light, and Yishi, and eventually you save me from what is going on. Therefore, Mimi Ira, from what should I possibly be afraid? Since you are with me, and I sense your presence with me, which of course is a major idea of the poem, the concept of presence of Hashem. And if I could just interrupt in the middle of the pasuk for a second, the Malbim, Meir Leibish ben Yechiel Michal, the great 19th century, he was a poet and a commentary and a halachist. He was just an amazing personality, and he gives, unlike most of his poems, gives an introduction to this poem. And in the introduction, he says, what he's saying is that God's hashgacha, the divine supervision that we get from Hashem, we get hashgacha from Hashem. So when you say that to kids in school, they think that you walk out of school with like an OU stamped on you. Oh, you're on the hashgacha. Okay. In Israel, you have to say badatz. But okay. But anyways, he says, but then there's the divine supervision that guides us is in direct proportion to your devekut ba'Hashem. He says that's the major idea in the poem. The more we cling to Hashem, the more hashgacha we have. When as we pull, God forbid, pull away from Hashem because of what's going on in life, because of whatever, okay, the hashgacha dwindles. The more devekut, the more we stick to Hashem, and that's the famous pasuk we're going to get to today of Achat Shoalti, right? That's the most famous pasuk in the poem. Okay, not my favorite pasuk in the poem, you'll see next week, but it's the most famous. And I just want to be with you, and the more you say I just want to be with you, the more guidance we get from Hashem. So that's the overall idea of the poem, but it comes out right away in the first pasuk. God, I know you guide me. I know you save me, help me. So therefore, why should I be afraid of anything? Second half, Hashem ma'oz chayai. Once I get close to Hashem, you become the ma'oz. Now the word oz means strength. So a ma'oz is probably the best translation is a stronghold. A place of tremendous, safety and sanctuary. If you followed Lord of the Rings, either read the books or watched the movies, that's like Helm's Deep in the second movie. That's like this impenetrable fortress, right? That's Ma'oz. That's the idea that there's no one can get in. Hashem Ma'oz Chaya, you are the fortress, the stronghold of my life. I'm just curious, what do you have in the Hirsch translation? You have the same thing?
The Lord is the source of my life's strength. Of whom then shall I be afraid?
Oh, okay. He's saying that it's not, Ma'oz is not the noun of a stronghold, which is what we were saying. He's saying it has to do with the source of my strength, and it's from the original word oz rather than ma'oz. Okay. Mimi evchad. So what's the difference between yira and pachad? So the first one is Hashem guides me, and therefore who should I have yira for? The second one is God strengthens and fortifies me. Okay, sounds like a breakfast cereal. Okay, God strengthens me and fortifies me. Okay, so who should I be? Pachad, afraid. So what's the difference between the two? And again, we turn to the Malbim. The Malbim, was a wordsmith. And he, of course, labored under the tradition, which is very powerful in Judaism, that biblical Hebrew has no synonyms. And so that whenever you have a word, and you have another word, there's two ideas. The words don't mean the same thing. So he translates the two. He says, "Hayirahu mipnei davar yadu." Yira is when you are afraid of something that you can see. He doesn't say it here, but he says it elsewhere. The root Yud Resh Aleph is related to the root Resh Aleph Hey, and has to do with sight. That when you say Yirat Hashem, it's almost like you can see Hashem. Okay, so the Yira is being afraid of things that you can see. Pachad obviously is, but Pachad hu mipnei davar bilti yadua. Those are the unknown dangers that lurk in our lives. We know the truth. Every road in life has unknown dangers lurking around the next bend, right? But David Melech in this first verse, opening the poem, is saying, I'm not afraid of anything. The things I know about, the things I don't know about, I don't have to fear them because Hashem is with me and fortifies me and strengthens me and guides me. So that's how he begins. The third verse is sort of followed this idea. Bekrov alai mereim, when the mereim, the bad guys. I don't think there's a better translation for that word than bad guys. Ra means bad, right? Mereim, those people that want me to do me harm. But I think in English, they're just plain bad guys, okay? I'm sorry, evildoers. Okay, bad guys. When the bad guys, karov elai, you're walking down that dark alley, right? And the bad guys come out of the shadows. You know the idea? Lechol bisari, to eat my flesh. Okay? Now, it's to take everything I have away from me. When the bad guys are coming out of the woodwork, they're approaching me with the purpose of really stripping me to the bone, taking everything I've got. Okay? Sarai va'oivaili, and my sarai. Sarai aren't necessarily so close. They are my oppressors. Okay? My tsarai, those are the people that cause me trouble. The oivai and my, that sounds like Yiddish. You say oivai, right? It sounds, but it's not. And my enemies are, as opposed to sonim, enemies are open adversaries. They clearly state their hatred for you. Okay? Hema kashlu v'nafalu. These people stumble and fall. In other words, they never, kashlu means they don't get to do what they wanted to do, and naflu means, and they're not going to come back. They're going to totally be wiped out. So nikashel, we know the word kishalon, a failure. A michshal is a stumbling block. They're going to stumble and fall. There's actually a midrash that this line in the poem is talking about Goliath. It isn't. That's not pshat. That's a midrash. Midrash says talking about, and in the midrash it says that when David HaMelech was getting ready to throw the slingshot, that Goliath was running towards him, and he wouldn't have had time to get off the shot, except that God caused his feet to actually get sucked into the ground. So he became an immobile target. That's why he hit him in the forehead. And that's the kashalu. Kashalu, there was miraculously he couldn't move. His feet got like tied. And then then David threw the stone, hit him in the forehead, and he fell. So they said that's what it's talking about. Because the reason for it is because of the first word in the pasuk. In the story in the first book of Shmuel, chapter 18, they talk about that everything is called krav, and it was going to be a krav ishi, a personal battle between two people, right? So the word krav comes up a lot in that chapter. So that's why that the midrash says that this verse is specifically talking about that particular incident. It's not pshat, And I think that the pshat is more that David HaMelech is cataloging different kinds of enemies that he encounters in his life. The first group don't necessarily have anything bad against David HaMelech. The Merayim, they're just bad guys. They would rob whoever came around the corner. They don't care. And there's nothing personal. It's not personal. It's business, right? For the bad guys in the first half of the book. But then Tsarai and Oivai are references to the people who specifically were out to get David HaMelech. And that, into that category, the Midrash specifies the two leaders of that category. Number one, Shaul, his father-in-law, and number two, Avshalom, his son. Tsarai va'oivai. That these people weren't necessarily bad to everybody, but they were definitely out to get me. As opposed to the Merayim in the first half of the pasuk, that's more generalized, bad guys. People that walk around wearing black hats. That in the cowboys stories, not in Meah Shearim. Yes.
So this is very optimistic then.
Wait till we get to verse 6. Yes. The beginning of the poem is extremely optimistic. Extremely optimistic. Yes. And that's a great way to start Elul. With this optimism and faith. Moshe Rabbeinu just went up to Har Sinai this morning to get us saved from the sin of the golden calf, and we have faith that Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to intercede on our behalf. Yes, it begins with tremendous sense of optimism. It'll change. We're Jews. We can't stay optimistic too long. Yeah, how it goes. Okay. Gimel. Im tachaneh olai machaneh. If they set up a camp against me. Now, what's different about a krav and a machaneh? A krav, which is in the previous verse, is more like a one-time shot. Okay, so in other words, the bad guys in the previous verse are more like one-timers. But if they're setting up camp against me, that means those are people that remain my enemies throughout. And when again, midrashically, we look at the pasuk, Bet talks about, and sometimes they get specified, the Greeks or the Romans or the Persians, or the Egyptians, depending upon what midrash you look at. Those were like one-time enemies back there in verse Bet. And then in verse Gimel, those people that set up their camp against us forever, that's Amalek. Amalek, because they're always there out to get us. Amalek takes on many historical guises, but they're always there. So that's what's going on in Gimel. Im tachneh olai machaneh, if they get set up against me, an encampment that seems to be a long-term threat to my existence, lo yira libi, my heart isn't afraid. That my heart still is it doesn't lose a beat. It doesn't speed up. I'm not overly bothered by it because, well, we'll get to that in a second. Im takum alai milchama, if a war comes my way, bizot ani boteach, I have faith in this. This is sort of like, I have confidence in confidence alone. In this, I have boteach, faith. The question is, what is this? What's the zot? And there are three opinions. I'm sure there are more, but there are three opinions I want to share with you. The first opinion, I think, is pshat. And that is, you just said that God is your Ori Gishi and Ma'oz Chayat. Now, bezot, with this that I just mentioned, that God is my guide and my salvation and my fortress, that gives me a sense of bitachon, a sense of security. That God has become my security blanket because I I have that faith that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing all these things on my behalf, guiding me and saving me, etc. Okay? A very popular pshat, that I don't think is pshat, but there are people that present it as pshat, say that with this I, boteach, I have faith, colon, and it refers to the next pasuk. And the next pasuk is that I want to be with you. Since I want to be with you, that they can in any way bother me. I'm not worried about them because really I have faith in my communion, in my closeness, in my dvekut, is the word we're going to use, with you, Hashem. And then there's one other idea that's from the Sfat Emet that's fascinating. The Sfat Emet, based on many ideas in Midrash and in Tanakh, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu never gives anybody a challenge that isn't appropriate to them and that they can't stand up to. And so what he says is, the fact that you're giving me a war means, that I can handle warfare. And it actually, it's always sort of comical when we discuss this. The only people who are supposed to go to war, if you read Rashi on Sefer Yoshua, okay, who he picked to go to battle, and he says only Talmidei Chachamim were allowed to go to war. Only great scholars could go to war. And so he says, the fact, God, that you're bringing me a war must mean I have schuyot. Because if you don't have merit, we're afraid that the war will kill you. So in other words, people that learn in yeshiva should be on the front lines. And chilonim should be the jobnikim working as secretaries in the offices. That's the way it should work, according to Yoshua, right? Not the way it really is, right? But anyways, so the Sfat Emet, writing in the 1880s, said what gave him confidence that he had a lot of merit was the fact that God was bringing him wars, because God wouldn't bring him anything that he couldn't handle. It's a fascinating idea. It shows a lot of faith. The rest of us, as opposed to greats like David HaMelech, who are periodically overwhelmed by life, don't always feel this way. We sometimes feel, oh my God, I can't handle all of this. This is beyond me. But if we were all tzaddikim on the level of of David HaMelech, of course, and of the Sfat Emet, the Ger Rebbe, then we would say, if Hashem is bringing me this nisayon, it's because I can handle it. It's a fascinating pshat. The mere fact that you're bringing me this challenge means I can handle it. Okay, good for him. I mean, I haven't gotten there yet. That's for sure. I often feel overwhelmed, right? And now we come to the most famous pasuk in the poem, and a lot of people, you're reciting this poem in shul, and you can hear people saying it out loud. It's like that's how big this verse is. Everybody, they blow shofar and everybody goes, but then you hear, people say this line word for word. This is the line, and there are just so many song versions of it. I mean, you can go on YouTube or Spotify, whatever music source you use, and you just see, there's half a dozen beautiful, famous tunes to this verse. So this verse seems to be central to the poem. And this, according to many Meforshim, is the Zot. I have bitachon because achat shawalti meit Hashem. There's only one thing, Hashem, that I really want from you. The Chazon Ish gave an interesting interpretation of this pasuk. Usually people say, I have bitachon because all I want is to be with you, and I know if I'm with you, I will succeed in the challenge, right? That's not what the Chazon Ish said. He said, that's not right. He said, I'm not concerned about whether I win or lose this war. I don't care. Because I'm not here to fight wars. I'm here to hang out with you, Hashem. And I know even if this war kills me, I will end up in a good place, or the good place, or a better place. And because since that's all I want, I don't care whether I win or lose, which is a fascinating shot. And I must be honest, the Chazon Ish did not have an easy life. He did not have an easy life. And this may have been his salvation. He as a younger man, middle-aged already, World War I basically really destroyed his life. He didn't really have a good marriage. He never had any children. He was always very, very poor until way late in his life when he really became famous and people were buying his svarim, and then he could put food on the table. He really had a very difficult life, and for him that may have been some solace to his difficult life. Baruch Hashem, we have his Torah, even though it was difficult. But that's his approach. I have faith because I don't care. It's not important to me whether I win or lose this war. That's my bitachon, because I only want one thing from you, Hashem. Oto avakesh. What's that mean? There's only one thing I ask, and that is my bakasha. What's the difference between a she'ela and a bakasha?
One is a request.
And what's the difference?
Well, a question is a question.
So one is just information, the other one is more for things. It's a possibility.
Bakasha is you want something for you. You vacation.
But what he's saying is, whatever it is that I'm asking for, that's really my bakasha. And the fact of the matter is, we ask for a lot of things, we don't really mean it. About a she'ela is something that by its nature can be very superficial. We ask for a lot of things, I sometimes, maybe I should close the computer for a second. I say this about the Jews in America. They talk about coming to Eretz Yisrael, but they don't mean it. They don't mean it. It's not on their radar screen. Okay, it's a she'ela, but it's not a bakasha. A she'ela is something you ask for, and it's by its nature superficial, and that's not necessarily important. A bakasha, that's what you really want. And so he's saying there's only one thing I'm asking from you, Hashem, and really that's the only thing I really mamish want. And what's that? Shivti b'veit Hashem kol yamei. The one thing I want is I just want to be with you. When you read the 10th parak, before we dissect the verse and take away all of its beauty, that's what happens when you pull it apart. The nuts and bolts are never as pretty as the entirety. Before we do that, when you read the 10th parak of Hilchot Tshuva, which according to Rabbi Soloveitch, the minhag was to learn that or read it, depending on your minhag, on Yom Kippur. And it's a love letter to Hashem. It's like, that the Rambam, who we don't think of as a romantic, the Rambam we think of as, as some Sephardic version of a Kalta Litvak, There's just, very rational and very, and very intellectual. And he says that we have to feel lovesick for Hashem. And he's quoting, of course, from Shir HaShirim, which is the most touchy-feely of all books in Tanakh, right? And he's just saying, that you have to think of Hashem the way, a young lover thinks about his beloved. And, and if you don't feel Hashem's presence, it's like you're being deprived of oxygen, and it's very, very beautiful. And that's what David HaMelech is talking about. He says, especially if you look at it like the Chazon Ish, I don't care what happens. I want there to be a Jewish kingdom. That's wonderful. But what I ultimately want is just to be close to you. To dwell in the house of Hashem all the days of my life. To to go after, to look for, to lachazot is probably related to the word chazon, to a vision, to view, okay? To view, noam Hashem, beautiful word, the pleasantness of God, ulevakia behechalo, and to, I'm going to translate it as visit, although we're going to see in a second, it's a big machlok what the word levakia means. Okay, so it sounds like I only want one thing, and it sounds like three things. It sounds like three things when you look at it. But we're going to see how some of the Meforshim deal with. Really, it's all one, and it's all descriptions of having an eternal closeness, devekut, with Hashem. That's what He wants. Okay, and we'll see other interpretations in a second, please.
There's just a very nice sentence at the end, which follows your line, which says.
This is Hirsch that she's quoting.
Yes, yes. It is an inner joy of life, which the enmity of men can neither destroy nor disturb. This inner moral, spiritual striving is the source of the fearless faith expressed in that verse.
Right. In other words, what he's saying, and this is in agreement with the Chazon Ish. There's nothing that this world can do to me because all I really want is my closeness to Hashem. And that's my life is that serenity based upon the fact that I have this devekut, I have this inner connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So there are a number of ways of dealing with this. So Rashi says levakir doesn't mean to visit. It means to boker every morning to be with Hashem. Levakir means to wake. In other words, every morning when I say, moda'ani, right? It's like I feel that you're really there. That, I was asleep and I wasn't thinking about you, Hashem, but my first thought in the morning is you, Hashem. And that's the way Rashi deals with it. Of course, a lot of people translate it like a bikor cholim, visiting, right? To visit. But other people say it's more related to the word bikoret, which we don't think of as a positive word, criticism. But really, the roots, according to many Meforshim, means to meditate, which ends up being a beautiful pshat. That when it says, therefore, levakir behechalot, to meditate in your holy place, in your sanctuary. So I just want to, sounds almost like a monk, a Buddhist monk. I don't mean Friar Tuck. I mean like, a Buddhist monk in a temple on a mountain in Tibet, which has a certain, we know, remember in the 70s, when going to an ashram was like a big thing. Who were all the people that went?
Jews.
Yeah. They took on these, yogi this and yoga that, right? But when you found out their real name was Goldstein and Schwartz, right? They were Jews because this is in us. This is in us. Sadly, we don't find it in Judaism for whatever reason. We're supposed to find it in, and it's here. It's right there, and it's like we miss it. It's sad, but it's sad, but it's true. Yeah. No, it's always important to always be searching. Dear Shu Hashem, we're all supposed to be seeking Hashem, but we're supposed to be looking in Judaism. This idea of I'm looking for Hashem, and you go to Buddhism, it's very sad, but it's in our nature, Baruch Hashem. It's that it's that Jewish nature to want to be close to Hashem. There's another approach that's Hasidish, and I apologize. I didn't write down who was the Hasidic authors, and I apologize because you should always say things b'shem amro. This is not mine, and I apologize. I don't know who said it. That when it says achat shawalti, really achat is an acronym. I'm saying one thing, but really there are three, and the three things are Aleph. Aleph is Eretz Yisrael. Aleph is Eretz Yisrael, and that's Lachazot B'Noam Hashem. Okay? To see the sweetness of God, that's in Eretz Yisrael. That's the first, okay? Chet is Chaye Olam Haba. And that is Shivti B'Veit Hashem. Dwelling in the house of God. And that's Chaye Olam Haba. The house of God means Shemayim, Olam Haba, right? And Tov is Torah. And Torah means Levakia Behechalo, to meditate in your holy sites, which means, holy sites specifically means the Beit Midrash. So that even though it says Achat, this one desire to come close to Hashem ends up being expressed in three ways. Okay? One is Eretz Yisrael, one is Olam Haba, and one is Torah. That's I can achieve the dveikut, the cleaving with Hashem in those three ways. And I just think that's a beautiful approach to the pasuk. And again, this is, according to many, many people, the seminal point of the poem. And according, as I said a minute ago, according to many Meforshim, it connects the first three psukim with these next three psukim, okay? That it's the fulcrum that connects them, because the first three talking about never having any fear of no matter what dangers, and now these three talk about being in this close proximity to Hashem, and it's because that of this desiring this close proximity to Hashem, that's why there's no fear. There's no fear in the second pshat. The first pshat is there's no fear because Hashem guides me, O Rivishi. Okay? But the second pshat is that these three verses are describing my relationship with Hashem, which saves me from all upset and worry and concerns of this world. So after we do that pasuk, it gets continued in the next pasuk. Ki yitzbaneni besuka biyom ra'ah. Because, or that, he, Hashem, hides me, covers me. Yitzbaneni, we know that word. We know that word from the Haggadah, right? What do we call eating the afikomen? Safon, because it was hidden. Why is the north called Safon? Because it's hidden from the sun. The Torah was written for people living in the northern hemisphere. Don't tell that to your friends from Australia and South Africa, but it's true. It's true. In other words, when you say Safon, because the sun rises in the east, crosses the sky along the southern side, okay, and then sets in the west. You never look north to see the sun. So the sun is never in the north, so the north is called hidden, dark, okay? And that's why Yirmiyahu talks about trouble comes from the north. It also has to do with the topography of Yerushalayim, that Yerushalayim has deep valleys on three sides and is a flat plateau on the northern side, so it's much easier to conquer Yerushalayim from the north, and generally Yerushalayim was conquered from the north, but that's a detail, okay? But we say on Bigadol, bad news comes from the north, okay? So because it's hidden. So it says, Ki Yitzvah Hashem hides me in a sukkah on a bad day. So when things are going wrong, Hashem somehow shields me. He covers me from it. Okay? Yastirenu b'seiter ohalo. And now I have to go back. Yitzbaneni is cover. Okay? Yastirenu is truly hide. And he hides me in the deepest recesses of his tent. Bitsur Yeromameni. And in a rock, in an immovable object, in a massive fortress of stone, he raises me up. Remember, fortresses tend to be in high places, okay? That's the way they built. It's very rare to see a fort in a valley. Forts are on tops of hills to make them harder to attack them. So in Tsur, now Tsur in Hebrew, we've talked about this before, there are 3 words for rock. In Hebrew, there's Evan, an itty bitty rock, and then there is a Sela, a medium-sized rock, and then there's a Tsur, this massive rock. It's like the rock of Gibraltar. Tsur is the metaphor in Hebrew for the immovable object. Tsur represents the concept of the immovable object. So Bitsur ani botea, Bitsur Tsuri Yeromameni, he raises me up in there. So in other words, Hashem hides me in 3 different ways. The first one is just covers me. I'm still there, but I'm behind some sort of facade, a sukkah. I don't necessarily need much protection. It's only raining. I just need, a tarp over me to prevent from the rain. Then sometimes Hashem makes us seter, makes us truly hidden. A seter nistar is something which it's not just that it's covered, it's by its nature difficult, if not impossible, to find. A seter is a secret. I mean, a deep, dark secret. And then Tsur, the 3rd level is I'm just in this impregnable position. And Hashem, does all 3 of those things for me. What's interesting is there are the Hasidim that take these 3 and line them up with the 3 things we ask for. In other words, the relatively flimsy protection is Eretz Yisrael. Because we know Eretz Yisrael, Yerushalayim that we know of has been conquered 31 times in known history. I'm sure there are more, before 1800 BC we don't know about. So, I mean, it's very nice to say we have Eretz Yisrael and we love having Eretz Yisrael, but, it's sometimes a bit of a chimera. We just pray that this incarnation of the Jewish state in Yerushalayim and in Eretz Yisrael will be permanent, but that's not been the historical reality, right? It's been temporary. So that's the first one. The second one is that he truly hides me. That is that I'm no longer in this world. That's Olam Haba, okay? And the rock upon which I fortify myself, that's Torah. It's just interesting that the Meforshim that do that continue it into this pasuk. Continue into this pasuk. Now, the next verse is a transitional verse. And the breakup of the poem, the way I have it here, is the breakup that's done in the Mossad Rav Kook commentary on Tehillim, and it's done by Amos Chacham, alav shalom, who is a great Bible scholar. And he feels that this is the conclusion of this second section. However, when we look at the poem in its entirety next week, when we wrap it up next week, this line is going to introduce the next part. Because look at the word va'ata. Va'ata and now. There is a transitional concept to it. Now you could connect it, because of the vav, you could connect it to the previous stuff. So I'm not saying that Amos Chacham is wrong, but when we see some other approaches to the poem next week, we're going to see that this really changes the entire atmosphere of the poem. And we'll just get a taste of it now. Va'atam, va'ata, and now, Yorum Roshi, raise my head, al oyvai svivotai. Raise over my enemies who surround me. Encircle me. Svivotai is, you think of like a sivivon, sub, right? who are, circling me. It's like, you go back to I don't know, I'm probably the only one who watched cowboys and Indians movies and things when I was a kid. This is like the wagon train, okay, Svivotai. Okay, they've encircled me. And I'm going to bring in his tent, especially if David HaMelech wrote this, it makes sense to say tent because he hadn't built the Beit HaMikdash yet. So the Aron HaKodesh was in a tent in Yerushalayim, okay? But we know that even later, sometimes the Beit HaMikdash was poetically referred to as a tent. It's quite often called Ohel David, even though David didn't build it, but we give him credit because he bought the land and built the foundations, okay? Zivchei Tru'ah. I bring Zvachim, animal sacrifices of Tru'ah. What's Tru'ah? Tekiyah, Tru'ah. Again, it's a reference to Rosh Hashanah. Tru'ah is what kind of note? Broken notes. Bakasha. Tekiyah is a cry of joy. Yay! Tru'ah is a broken crying, whether it's wah, 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 or depending on how you cry. Whether it's, Tru'ah or Shvarim, doesn't make a difference, but it's a cry. So in other words, David HaMelech in this poem does not sound as confident as he did just a minute ago. He's now talking to Hashem. He's worried about this stuff. And when he brings the sacrifice, these animal sacrifices to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they're out of fear, trepidation, tears. Ashira va'azamra l'Hashem. I'm going to sing, and I'm going to write poetry. Azamra, make music to Hashem if I win. But he's begging, and this begins a fascinating change in the poem that is, I think, unique. In Tehillim. Many of the Tehillim that we've gone through begin with problems and end on a high note. David HaMelech is really in trouble. Mina meitze karatika, okay? Mima'amakim, from trouble, from the depths. That a lot of the poems begin that way. And then at the end, we have something good. This poem is the opposite. We have to try to understand why. We're not going to be able to do it this week, but we will. But I just want you to see how the poem changes at this point. And I think it's the ve'ata that is the turning point. Like the pivot in the poem. And David, in the beginning of the poem until here, sounds totally confident. And now he doesn't. Starting here, he doesn't sound so confident. And look at verse Zion. Shema Hashem koli ekra. God, listen to my voice. I'm calling out to you. V'chanei va'aneni. Show me grace and answer me. By the way, if I were Temani, those two words would sound very much alike. Chaneni va'ahneni. We don't pronounce the ayin correctly. We make the ayin sound like an aleph. But the original Hebrew, and the Temanim continue it, that the ayin is also a guttural, okay? And chaneni va'ahneni. And when you say it that way, it's like your voice is cracking. He's crying. I feel that something's wrong. I feel things aren't as they should be. And just a minute ago, everything was hunky-dory. So we're seeing something that is unusual in biblical poetry, in Tehillim specifically, that we're starting off on a high note. Usually when you start off on a high note, it's usually those are short poems, and the whole poem is happy, whoop-de-doo, right? But this poem starts off, wow, Hashem Oriv Yishi, but now he's like afraid. And so we have to talk about what is going on. What is David HaMelech's what emotional vicissitudes is he going through that brings him to this turn of events? Just to leave you with one idea. We're going to see a lot of ideas next week, but the most popular, most famous idea is he wrote the first half of the poem before the sin with Bathsheba. And the second half of the poem he wrote after the incident with Bathsheba. I have to be careful, I call that a sin, because the Gemara says that anyone who says David HaMelech sinned, is making a mistake. What I think that Gemara means is, if you think that David committed adultery, ni'uf, you're making a mistake. It's hard to say David HaMelech didn't do something wrong, okay? But it wasn't the tremendous sin you thought it was. It was bad, but of a lesser amount. And you've got to say they did something wrong, because the Navi tells them to do tshuva. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, punishes him. So anyways, that is the famous approach to understanding why, according to the Midrash on the Tehillim, why the poem changes attitude at this point. And next week we'll quickly get to my favorite verse in the poem, which is back down there in Pasuk Yud Aleph. We'll get there next week. But we've seen the glory of David's relationship with Hashem. Okay, and now we're going to see David HaMelech begging, pleading with the Kadosh Baruch Hu to establish or reestablish that relationship. And then we have to put that into context again of Elul and Yomim Noraim. Okay. Oh, it's an amazing poem. It's really one of my favorites.
But that makes sense if you look at the rest of it.
Yeah. David HaMelech is mamish